I'm all about precision personalized health and what I'm doing with my medical AI and my knowledge, because I don't follow just the AI. The types of results I'm getting and quickly are beyond phenomenal. You just have to do things the right way. You want to track progress over time. So cholesterol is a story. It's not a snapshot of right now. Things don't just happen overnight, but we can lower things. We can start to make differences pretty quickly when you get dialed in, not the guesswork. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins. This is a place where we discuss everything lifestyle and environment and how it relates to our genetic expression. So today we're going to be talking about lipids, cholesterol, some of these myths we're hearing, and they are myths, especially coming from the strict keto and definitely the carnivore world. I want to set the record straight. I have been trying to find some expert on this that doesn't have an agenda, and it's super hard to find. I did find one, though. Ultimately, he's fantastic. I've been following his videos on YouTube. He does not have an agenda, but he will not be able to record with me for about 3 months. So I said, people need to hear some basic information, how to get the proper testing, what to look for. Understand this, wrap your heads around, instead of just listening to the influencers out there that have agendas, because we are all so very different. So before I dive in, I want to be really clear about where I'm coming from. I'm not a scientist. I am not a medical professional. I'm an epigenetic human performance coach. I work with real humans, real life, I use data, I see patterns, and I put that into context to help make sense of what's actually going on in their bodies instead of saying, oh, this is a diet you need to follow, which is what you typically get around influencers, some of the quote experts, and definitely physicians or MDs. Functional medicine, you'll still get a lot of generic because they're trained that, oh, A and B equals C, instead of looking at a full picture. I bring, again, the genetics into it and then go deeper with the pH 360, which is, again, the game changer. So precision is what I do. And I will also tell you that if you listened to me for a while, you'll know this, but I used paleo to coach my people for my first 4 years of coaching. And it made sense to me because it worked for me. And what I also realized is that after I started using the pH 360, that, my gosh, it's not right for everybody. And we really have to look at the individual regardless of genetics. And I've had some things go on with clients and myself where you would look at the genetics and it says, hey, especially for me, carnivore, a great diet for you. And that's around some nutritional SNPs, genetic SNPs. But when I look at other genetic SNPs, it would be a disaster for me to go high saturated fat and to go very high protein. So we have to start looking at the body as this complex system instead of this cut and paste bullshit that we're out there getting. And it's making people worse. So I want you to be your best medical advocate, whether you're working with me, somebody else, not ChatGPT, but you to understand, to do the right testing and work with the people that get it and want to look at you as an individual. So that's my little preface to this before I delve into the actual information around the podcast. What I'm going to do here is look at cholesterol, genetics around it, genetics around lipids themselves, heart health, and also insulin resistance, because that's a lot of why you'll hear people say they're going to or are on a full meat and saturated fat-based type of diet. And for those of you who don't know, keto, a true keto is about 75% fat and then protein and very low carbohydrate. I think you try to stay maybe 10, 20 grams of carbs a day. With a carnivore, they don't do any. A true carnivore is it's all very, very high saturated fat and very, very high protein. A lot is again, these are the hardcore carnivores. You're going to see all meat. I've had clients come to me that have been eating nothing but meat and butter, like beef and butter, freaking ribeyes or burgers all day, all night, like multiple times, a pound at a time. It's okay. So if it works for some people, great. But for others, it's literally killing them. So see where you fall in here. So I'm going to start with some myths that we need to debunk. There's a lot of cholesterol myths floating around, and I want to tackle the most common ones head on. Number one, cholesterol always goes up on a keto or carnivore, and that is expected. And they say, that's okay. It's going to go up. So we expect it, don't look at it. Just blow it off. And it often does rise in these types of diets, but we cannot ignore it. We have to dig deeper. If you are on one of these diets, you need to test further than a basic cholesterol panel. And I'm going to get into the different types of testing, so bear with me here. I'm just talking about myths that I'm going to debunk as we go through, because it's going to be based largely on LDL particle sizes and numbers and something called apolipoprotein B. You cannot ignore these things when you're on a food plan like this. Number two, the higher the cholesterol, the better. Not true. Higher LDL, and this is research shows, and again, you're going to hear this, that no, research does not show this, or this was old, dated agenda research, but very high LDL absolutely does increase cardiovascular disease in many people. We can't glorify extreme numbers without understanding the genetic propensities of the person and what is actually expressing and looking deeper at labs. And again, I will have examples. Another one is LDL going up means your body is thriving. Not necessarily. LDL carries cholesterol to the tissues, including the brain, but extremely high LDL particles is a very serious factor to consider. So again, just looking at cholesterol itself and saying the higher the better, that's a problem. And I'm probably going to get haters out of this. And I'm going to get people, I don't care. I don't care. It's a problem. Don't worry about family history. It's the insulin. It's not the cholesterol. Family history matters, but it doesn't mean that you have to go down that road. This is where lifestyle comes in. Now, you've got some genetics, and I'm going to talk about these, one called LPA, one called ApoE4. Then we have the familial hypercholesterolemia, and that's can be also abbreviated. If you see FH, that's what that means. They are very important risk factors that diet alone cannot just overwrite. So we have to pay attention to these things. Another one is my HDL is high, and I hear this one all the time. I say, how do your lipids look? Oh, I just had cholesterol. My LDL was a bit high, but my doctor said because your HDL, and now you see your LDL is what has been coined or termed the bad cholesterol, and the LDL is the good cholesterol. Again, I'm going to discuss what these are. But the HDL is high, so I'm protected. I'm good. I don't have to do any other further testing. And I freaking cringe. High HDL, and I see it in labs because I always do the deep dive testing, unlike most doctors. High LDL does not always protect you if your LDL sizes or numbers are high. If your apolipoprotein B is high, if your LPA is high, and that one's a very genetic one we're going to talk about, Or if your inflammation is high, HDL can become dysfunctional under chronic inflammation. So, right there, there's just several things that I'm just going, I hear this shit all the time and it drives me crazy. Okay, so I'm going to set this record straight. Brain health. This is another one where I hear our brains are all cholesterol and we need cholesterol for the brains. Absolutely, we do. It's essential. About 20 to 25% of the body's total cholesterol is in the brain. And it's critical for nerve cell membranes, synapses, myelin sheaths. It's in every single cell in the body. Now, is low cholesterol great? Not not all the time, because there's studies that show that very low cholesterol, specifically in older adults, has a higher mortality rate because it's often, and this is what they don't tell you, that they have found in these studies, it's often reflecting of lack of muscle. It's muscle loss due to illness, aging. A lot of the time, the diet changes as people get older. They don't have as big an appetite. So things start to change. Frailty, underlying health issues. When someone has cancer, you will see, and this is the doctor that I'm going to have on in April. I'm going to have him go into depth about this. But these health issues, including cancers, you will tend to see, because it's harder for them to eat, you'll see a drop in cholesterol. So the cholesterol gets very low, and then they had low cholesterol and it was higher mortality. So you have to look at the context of where it is. Now, when people say our brains are all cholesterol, yeah, that's not far from the truth. Again, we have this 20 to 25% of the body's total cholesterol in the brain. So why it's essential? Cell membranes, those keep our neurons stable, keep them functional. We have the synapses, that's connections where the brain cells communicate. And then we have myelin sheaths. This is the insulation around the nerves, and this allows for really fast, efficient signaling in the brain. So without enough cholesterol, we do get brain function that suffers. And you'll see when people go on statin drugs, it removes a lot of that. So there's studies out there showing that Alzheimer's risk can actually increase. That's why I like to try to keep people, let's do as much as we possibly can with lifestyle, because I see how well it can work when you do the right things to get unhealthy cholesterol, unhealthy lipid numbers into safe ranges, which again can vary per person. So we don't want to just aim for extremely low cholesterol numbers, because that isn't automatically healthy. So it's not just a heart marker, it's a building block for brain function, hormones, overall cellular health. We're not trying to eliminate it. And I look at some clients' blood work and I say, ooh, this is too low. We need to actually bring the cholesterol up a bit. So I'm not sitting here advocating for low cholesterol. I'm looking for healthy levels per the individual. Basics around cholesterol. Cholesterol itself it's a waxy substance, and your body needs it to build hormones. Yes, hormones. Vitamin D and cell membranes. It's also important. Your liver makes it. Your liver makes most of it. That's how important it is. And only about 20% of it comes from your actual diet. We have the different types of cholesterol. So we have LDL, and this is the quote, the bad cholesterol. It's low density lipoprotein, LDL. And what this does is it carries the cholesterol from the liver into the cells. And we have there's different particle sizes. We have small particle, and I'm going to talk a bit more about that when I talk about the testing for this. But there's small, dense particles, they're the tiny ones, that are the more dangerous ones, the riskier ones. And they're more likely to get stuck in your arteries, where your bigger ones, and they call these, you'll hear buoyant, you'll hear fluffy, they're less harmful, harder to get into the cells because they're bigger, but they're not risk-free if the total particle count is super high. HDL, high density lipoprotein. And this is the quote, the good cholesterol. And this carries the cholesterol from the tissues back to the liver for removal. So higher LDL, HDL, as I said, is generally more protective. But when you have inflammation going on or high LDL particle numbers, then your HDL is likely not going to be providing you with the full protection that it normally would. Next, we have triglycerides. And this is usually what gets measured when you say, give me a lipid panel. You're going to get the HDL, you're going to get the cholesterol, which is total, HDL, LDL, and then they'll do triglycerides. These are a blood fat. They're a type of fat in your blood. And when you eat, your body converts the excess calories into triglycerides and it will store them for energy. High triglycerides, a lot of the times are going to point to something called insulin resistance, which I'm also going to talk to. And that is a big driver of cardiovascular disease. And this is where the carnivore advocates will come in and say, then you need to go, when someone's insulin resistant, yank every carb and go all meat and fat. And that will stop the insulin resistance and stop that drive for the cardiovascular disease. And what you're going to hear from me today is not for everyone. So another thing that you'll see on a basic lab under the triglyceride to HDL ratio, it's pretty simple marker, but it's pretty effective in looking at metabolic health. And you ideally want to be below 2. You'll see the 2 mg/dl. So that's where you want to be, at least below that. And I'll talk about numbers here as well. 150 is the cutoff with triglycerides. I like to see optimal well under 100. I've seen people in the 200s and 300s, 400s. A big driver, I'm just going to tell you this, a big driver of triglycerides, people, is booze. What isn't booze a big driver of? I've definitely seen that. HDL, we like to see at minimum 60 to 70. LDL, it'll say be under 100. But again, that can vary. I've been up near 200, but with particle sizes looking good. So again, you have to look at the total picture. But there are the lines. They say total cholesterol, the guideline is supposed to be under 200 or 200 or under. So we're half of it there or less should be the LDL. And that's what you see on lab markers. Okay. So then you bring in the glucose and insulin and cell membrane health into it. You need to test these as well. We have insulin sensitivity versus insulin resistance. And I'm going to explain this pretty simply here. Insulin sensitivity, if you think of it, it's like a key, and then you have your cells are your doors. And when your body is insulin sensitive, which we want, that key just fits right in there, opens up the door. The glucose, that's your blood sugar, or the sugar in the blood can enter into the cells nice and easily to be used as energy. That's what we want. That way the blood sugar stays nice and steady and the body runs pretty efficiently. Yeah, good energy instead of these peaks and valleys. Insulin resistance, imagine that key doesn't fit. It's having a really tough time. So even though the insulin, it's still the key, it's not opening this door well. So the glucose isn't able to get into the cell efficiently for that energy. So what happens is it will start to build up in the blood. So you're going to see high glucose levels. And so that, especially over time, it puts so much stress on the body, on different systems in the body. It creates inflammation. It increases risk for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, which you don't want, and then other metabolic issues as well. And I'm going to talk about reasons why this can happen. A lot of people, this is what I hear all the time, and I mentioned it earlier, talk about, I actually got into it with a dude on Facebook on an MTHFR page. He thought I was crazy when someone said numbers never go up or your blood sugar There's insulin resistance is impossible on a carnivore diet. I'm like, yeah, bull, because I see it. And he said, where do you see this? I don't see this. How do you know? Insulin resistance, they say it's impossible because there's no carbs. One of the issues is cell membrane viscosity. High saturated fat intake can make your cells, which are usually easily permeable, so things can get in there, the nutrients get that glucose in there. It makes them viscous or stiff, harder to penetrate. And so it makes it more difficult for the glucose to get into the cells to be used as energy. This is why I have seen this on a ketovore, carnivore, or keto type diet. If the membrane's too rigid, the glucose can't get into the cell and it builds up in the blood. So you're going to see that. And that's the insulin resistance is there. And the blood glucose, you're going to see the high levels of glucose as well. The insulin's trying to pump harder. Even if your fasting glucose looks normal, the body could potentially be struggling to process the sugar effectively at the cellular level. And over time, this is what leads to the insulin resistance. Because like I said, the insulin's just trying to do its job and it's not happening. So right there, myth dude on MTHFR page. Another thing is you can get very rapid improvement. And I've seen this with the PH360 platform in my clinical experience. When somebody shifts out of a very high saturated fat intake to more plant-based fats, more monounsaturated fats, things like olive oil, avocados, avocado oil, and more plants overall, believe it or not, going higher plant intake, loosen up those high saturated fat meats, eating the ribeyes all day, right? I have seen improvement within 2 weeks. 100%. It shows that the body is responsive. It is not fixed. Our body is an amazing machine that when we give it the right things at the right times, it can recover. I see this all the freaking time in my practice. So if you think of I'm going to put this in layman's terms for anybody going, I'm not sure I get this. So if you think of your body as like a sponge, right? When the sponge is dry, it dries out, it gets hard. And then you go to put the water in it. Think of that. That's your glucose. It's having a hard time getting in there. So that glucose is going to rise even if you're not eating sugar. When you get that water nice, get that sponge all nice and dampened, things start to absorb. So think about that with better fats, with tweaking your lifestyle as a whole. Ain't just about the food. It starts to soak up, and then the sugar starts to get used properly. That glucose starts to get used properly in the cells again. So why, again, does this matter on a keto or carnivore type of diet? A high fat, and again, this is high saturated fat. People are living on meat, butter, cheese, like everything that's super high saturated fat, bacon. They appear safe because your blood sugar stays. It's looking like it's staying low, especially in the beginning. But if the cells are insulin resistant, then it's like a silent time bomb ticking with this all accumulating. And that's why people say their labs look great in the beginning. And then they come to me and say, I've been doing this for 9 months. So I got one girl, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 8 years. If you listen to Adrienne on my podcast, early podcast from 2024, one of my very first client, carnivore keto for 8 years. And all of a sudden her numbers were looking crazy around the metabolic issues, around glucose, insulin, and even the lipids. So that's why measuring things like your triglyceride to HDL ratio, the fasting insulin, fasting glucose, not just glucose and A1C. Doctors leave out the insulin. It's so telling. You have to have a full picture. So they're going to really reveal the metabolic health beyond just those basic glucose numbers. Now I want to talk about the labs. Okay, these are advanced lipid labs, and I do this with everybody. Lipoprotein fractionation, or you'll hear particle sizes. If you look on it's standard in my foundational labs, but some you'll have to ask your doctor for it. And it's lipoprotein particle size and count. So it's going to look at your small, dense LDL particles. And remember, a couple minutes ago, I said this is the one that's the higher risk. So the little small guys, the tiny guys that make it easier to get into that cell and cause plaque buildup in arteries. It's a higher risk for atherosclerosis. And then you have your large LDL or your fluffy particles. It's lower risk, but if that particle count is high, and this measures the total number of the LDL particles overall, even if the LDL cholesterol overall looks normal, but you have a high LDL particle number, you've got elevated risk. So say you have an LDL cholesterol number of 120. Okay. Again, that's it. I would look at that if that was the only thing I was looking at, and I'd be like, "Hey, you're fine. Yeah, it's over 100. You're good." But I had a client that had LDL particles. Now, I want you to know, over 2,000 is a very high risk. He was at 2,800. Now, he had very high cholesterol too, and I'm actually gonna talk about him as a case study in a minute. But this is why particle count matters. So, he came to me, he had cholesterol of over 500 total. The LDL cholesterol alone was up in the high 300s. Pre-diabetic, very long family history and personal history of high cholesterol, even on it was a vegetarian diet, but I think it was not a real healthy vegetarian diet. I don't think a lot of those are anyway, but that's again, I'm gonna get haters for that. Bring it. And he had some pretty scary symptoms. And I said, "We need to do a deep dive," because the practitioner he worked with did not do a deep dive. Look at particle sizes, look at apolipoprotein B, LPA. We also targeted the food pretty strong. So instead of eating ribeyes and cheese and butter all the time, or in 1 or 2 meals, actually, just very large amounts of it, we added fiber, soluble fiber, anti-inflammatory fats, really just lean protein. We added poultry back, got away from the really saturated as we waited for DNA to come back. And in just 3 weeks, the LDL dropped over 100 points. Small LDL particles actually looked good, but that particle count number remained at almost 3,000, which indicated a very, very high risk. So you see that the number of those particles was enough to create serious cardiovascular risk. I said, all right, now I'm lifestyle. What I'm looking at, because also the ApoB was very high, very high. And again, that is apolipoprotein B, very big risk factor. And I'm going to go into what that is in a second. So there were a lot of factors, and I said, this is out of my scope here. Go see a cardiologist. And this person went to a big carnivore advocate cardiologist who said, go ahead, go back to the carnivore because the particle size matters more than the number. So I don't know. I'm not working with that person anymore. I have no idea what happened. Some people are going to go where they feel their thinking is best, and that's fine. I just want my people to be protected no matter what and have all the information you could possibly have to be your best medical advocate. So the takeaway there, particle size matters, but it doesn't solely matter. It's how it's used, right? So the LDL particle size and the LDL particle number, when you combine it with genetics, family history, insulin resistance, or prediabetes, it all plays together. It's not just one thing. Okay, apolipoprotein B and apolipoprotein A1. So we have ApoB and ApoA1. ApoB, and I test for this in my DNA, so we can look at propensities there. And I'm going to talk about DNA a little bit. ApoB is found on all atherogenic particles. So your LDL, your LPA, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. High ApoB or high apolipoprotein B It's like more delivery trucks carrying cholesterol to your arteries. So that number we want to keep on the lower side. High ApoB is higher risk. And that ApoB is a they're realizing what a major factor is with this. And when I see someone comes up with variants with ApoB, the first thing I want to tell them is this puts you at increased risk for cardiovascular. We want to keep inflammation low. And we also want to lower saturated fats because it's around fat intake overall, especially saturated fat intake. So if you're doing a keto or a carnivore diet and you're not even checking ApoB levels or your genetics around it, if none of that, you're playing with potential fire. ApoA1. This is the main protein in HDL. So these are opposite of each other. This one's like your cleanup crew, your relief pitcher. It removes the cholesterol from the arteries. So you'll see on a test where you will have an ApoB, ApoA1 ratio. And this is one of the most powerful predictors of cardiovascular risk. So if you look at it this way, your ApoB, this is your delivery trucks. They're putting the cholesterol in the arteries. ApoA1, the cleanup crew that comes in and says, nope, we're going to take it out. So more trucks, less cleanup crew. If you have that ratio is off, you're going to get more traffic jams, which equals plaque buildup. And I actually went into my AI and said, give me a good analogy because some of this can go over people's heads easily. And again, I want to make this raw, real, and relatable to the everyday person. So think about it. You don't want to have too many trucks taking the cholesterol in and not enough bringing it back out. So that ApoB, ApoA1 ratio is a really great test. And again, I test for that all the time. LPA. This one is really starting to be talked about a lot more. This one is not in my basic DNA, but I think I'm gonna try to add it. I'm gonna talk to my lab and see if we can add that into my basic reports because I think this is so important. But I do have it on a specific cardiovascular report that I can always add on with no problem. It's a genetic LDL variant, and it's highly inflammatory and prothrombotic, which means it promotes blood clotting. And a high LPA number, so you can have a propensity for it genetically. Again, okay, so you have that's one DNA related. Higher LPA is a higher risk for a heart attack and stroke. And it is so rarely tested in standard lipid panels. Very few testing. And even when I've seen ApoB tested, I often do not see LPA. And I think part of it is the research is showing that it doesn't seem to be helped as much by diet, doesn't seem to really control it. But my thought is, it sure as hell can't hurt. It sure as hell can't hurt to get your butt moving at the right times and the right types of exercise, the right types of foods at the right time, lowering stress or good stress recovery, because you're really not going to lower stress, right? So we want to try to lower our stressors as much as possible. We want to have good social interactions, environmental toxins, all these things have to play a part. So if you're dialing in your lifestyle, it's got to lower the risk somewhat. Normal range is going to be for LPA under 30 is going to be low risk. 30 to 50 is you're looking at moderate risk. And 50 is going to be high risk, 50 or higher. So get those on every effing lab report you get yearly, please. I would do if you're trying to implement some protocols to change with it with people, my people, we're probably going to check again in 3 months, those just specific things to see if we're moving the needle, which I've yet to see us not do. Okay, here's another one that not everybody tests, but I do. It's called homocysteine. It's like a little hidden cardiovascular risk marker. Really, the people that test for this, you'll see functional medicine will test for it. Or if someone says, if a doctor actually listens or a coach or whatever says, I have MTHFR, because with MTHFR variants, you can tend to see a higher homocysteine number. And again, high, not good. Bigger is not better here. So it's an amino acid, homocysteine, that's in the blood and it's produced during methionine metabolism. Why does it matter? Elevated homocysteine can damage blood vessels, promote clot formation. So if you've got high homocysteine and that LPA going on, you better freaking dial your lifestyle in. And it increases cardiovascular risk. So think of it as the quiet, the silent killer. Okay, the ninja who's in the dark and is just coming out of nowhere. It's the like the ninja to your arteries. I think everybody should test for it, but at least if you have a family history of early heart disease, high cholesterol, stroke, MTHFR variants, or any cardiovascular events that you're like, we have no idea why this happened. There was no history. Nothing was just out of the blue. Have the homo of the other person or you, make sure that homocysteine is always tested. What can drive it up? Again, MTHFR variants. Low intake of things like B6, B12, and folate, which is B9. And I'm not talking about folic acid. That's a synthetic form that is enriched in your enriched rice and all your flours and baking. And you'll see it in some vitamins. Make sure you're getting folate. No surprise, high stress, smoking, poor kidney function. We'll see that get tested every time someone's got kidney issues. And then chronic inflammation. Are you seeing some patterns here? Chronic inflammation. Inflammation is the cause of dis-ease and it leads to disease. Lifestyle, and diet interventions. You want to support methylation with things like leafy greens. That's where you're going to get the folate in there. Legumes. Don't be afraid of eating some beans. Some people don't tolerate them, some do. I will tell you, if you're like, they make me gassy AF, get them dry. Stay away from the canned shit. That's really high in histamine too. For those of you that have histamine issues, you want to take the dry bean, put it in some water, put some baking soda in there. And people ask me how much. I'm like, I don't know. I just put some in there. Probably a couple tablespoons. I don't know. And agitate it a little bit, cover them up. And you want to soak those bad boys about 24 hours. And then if you want these beans and you want to feel better, get an Instant Pot because it's a quick cook. This is the key. 5 minutes in the Instant Pot. Those soaked beans are done. It lessens the lectins. Even the dude, what's his name? Why am I starts with a G? Gundry. Dr. Gundry, who's the plant paradox guy, who's like, all these plants are bad for you unless you take my supplement. He even has, if you look for it, you can find it hidden. Soak the beans. And it removes the lectins and that quick cook lowers the histamine. So I have been able to tolerate beans, and I typically don't tolerate beans. I didn't for 12 years being paleo. Wonder why. Okay, there's your little bean info. B vitamins, again, test, don't guess. I always test my people for B12 and folate. I like to do the red blood cell. It would be MMA for the MMA. You're going to see your active and inactive. That's for the B12. That's the best marker there. And for folate, do the RBC folate. Exercise, regular exercise, get off your ass. I don't care if it's 10 minutes after each meal, you're making headway. And I've talked till I'm blue in the face on here about that kind of stuff. Stress management. It's all about the recovery. You're never going to get rid of stress. It's always going to be something, whether it's good stress or bad stress. You have to find the ways that work for you for good stress recovery. Sleep. And I'm not talking 5 hours of sleep. And I'm not talking 2 to 3 in the morning. Good quality sleep. If you are not waking rested, fully rested, and ready to take on your day, it's a problem. Get a tracker. It doesn't have to be an expensive Garmin. You can get an inexpensive Garmin. Find something that tracks your sleep and see what your cycles are actually doing, because what you're eating, when you're training, how you're training, all of these things, your stress, all of these things are affecting everything here, including your sleep cycles. Reduce inflammation. That's going to come from food, hugely from stress. Environment. I get super inflamed when it's very cold, very, very cold. I have a friend tries to get me out there at 4 degrees, and she says, it's not bad in the trees. Yeah, it's the trees might stop the wind, but I have Raynaud's. I don't know if anybody else has Raynaud's. If you do, I'd love to message with you on my Facebook page. It is brutal, and it is actually dangerous for us under 20 degrees to be out there in that type of an environment. It causes a lot of inflammation and problems. Can affect your homocysteine. So doing all these things in good areas can help to lower that homocysteine naturally. There are some other genetics where, because typically we say use folate to lower the homocysteine. But if you look at it with other genetics, it may not be ideal for you. It may not have that effect that you want. So lifestyle, start there first. Don't rely on supplements for everything. So it's not just a vitamin marker around the B vitamins. It's a powerful cardiovascular signal that reflects both genetics and lifestyle. Insulin sensitivity. We already tapped into that a little bit, but I'm also going to hit on inflammation here. And the big markers here, you'll see some doctors will test CRP. We want to make sure they're testing HSCRP. Okay, there is a difference. This is high sensitivity. And that's the HS. The CRP is C-reactive protein. And I had a doc years ago say, we call it the crap CRP because it's crap. It's inflammation. So CRP, it's a protein that your liver makes in response to inflammation. And the high sensitivity version, it detects even very low levels of inflammation that can impact cardiovascular risk. Chronic, low-grade inflammation accelerates arterial damage, and that makes LDL particles and LPA even more harmful. So do you see how all these are playing in a circus? How do you test it? Yeah, that's into the blood work. We like it to be under 1. I have been listening to some summits, and some doctors are now talking about it being 0.7 or less. Some say 0.3. But right now, go under 1. Risk is more average, around 1 to 3, but it's still an increased risk. Over 3, you're at high risk. So think of CRP as like your smoke detector for your body. Even if the cholesterol looks fine and your CRP, HSCRP is high, something is smoldering. Okay? So it's like the spark is lit and you want to put that fire out now. You got to dial in your freaking lifestyle. Again, this isn't something you can just supplement away. People say, how to get rid of inflammation. Change your freaking lifestyle. Stop the excuses. IL-6, and I know you've heard me talk about this on here. IL-6, it's a signaling molecule, an inflammatory cytokine that's released during inflammation. It stands for interleukin-6. High IL-6 drives inflammation and contributes to atherosclerosis. I also see it in genetics. Again, we're going to talk about genetics in a few minutes. I just want to get through these basics first. Genetic variants in the IL-6 genes are also with saturated fats, especially increased risk with cardiovascular disease, but also insulin resistance. Saturated fat, insulin resistance, playing together. Again, this one, I haven't tested this. I'm going to look and see how much it would cost to test this on my panel because I may want to start testing it. It's going to be part of an advanced panel. And we're already doing an advanced panel and it's a blood test. So again, if the fire alarm's going off inside the arteries, chronic high IL-6, it means that your arteries are under stress, even if the standard cholesterol looks normal. So that's your little layman translation there. IL-6, now the baseline of your IL-6 activity, that's influenced by the genetics that I was just talking about. And so the certain variants there, and I will tell you this if you do DNA with me, we look at that. I have it under my fat panel, under my saturated fat panel, It is all there. We definitely want to pay attention to it, especially if there are variants. Things that drive up IL-6, chronic stress, too little sleep. I have a little cheat sheet because I always will forget something. Too much food. Who's out there eating till they're stuffed, right? Like a tick that you could prick and explode, all including especially sugar and refined foods. Because most of them are loaded. You got sugar and saturated fat. Smoking. I hate to be the bearer of bad tidings, but again, I'm going to ring the bell on alcohol. And listen up, athletes, you endurance athletes. It gets elevated with 2+ hours of exercise a day. Over 2 hours of exercise. So I notice when I go on some of my really long hikes, especially in the summer, I'm out there 6 hours. I come back, I feel so inflamed. And it's the TNF alpha, that's another one that's affected. So pay attention to your body. Pay attention. IL-6, it interacts with the insulin resistance pathways. Higher IL-6 expression and higher saturated fat equals impaired insulin signaling. Okay. Some people are just going to be wired to have higher inflammation. And when you combine it with the very high saturated fat or the extreme low carb, the glucose and the fat processing is likely less efficient. And I look at that. How does an individual genetically process saturated fats? Now, again, genetics, probabilities, and propensities, but when it comes to processing these things, I have yet to see lab numbers tell me different. So testing IL-6 can show if the inflammation is quietly raising that heart rate or metabolic risk, or even if your cholesterol numbers look okay. Fasting glucose. This measures the blood sugar after an 8 to 12-hour fast. And we want to be fasted for cholesterol, but that's why you'll see your physician or me or anybody, your coach, whoever you're working with, tell you when you go get labs, make sure you don't take anything in other than water 8 to 12 hours prior to the fast. That's why it's usually best to get up in the morning and just go and get it over with. It's going to show, the fasting glucose is going to show how well your body manages the blood sugar when you're not eating. A high fasting glucose can indicate insulin resistance. I just had this with a client last night. She finally got a CGM, or this was yesterday morning. She got a glucose monitor. I've been waiting for this. It dropped to below 70 in the middle of the night and then woke up with a high of 99. And that's borderline. That's pretty high. And that's fasted. And it's due to the food intake she was getting. And so we saw that she's having these real peaks and these real valleys, and her insulin is super high, trying to keep up with this. So again, you think of the insulin as the key that's opening the cell doors, and if the doors don't want to open, the sugar's piling up, and then the fasting glucose is going to check how much sugar is actually piling up there after a night without food. Let's see, next. I have my list here so I don't forget anything. Advanced cardiovascular risk tests. So when I told my client, I said, I advise you to go get further testing, get a CAC, and that is a coronary artery calcium score. You might just hear it, a calcium score. You'll hear CAC, and it measures the calcified plaque in the coronary arteries through a CT scan. The higher the CAC number or the calcium score number, that's more plaque building up and an increase for a heart attack risk. And what I looked up, so you have 0 is no plaque, super low risk. Ring the bell, fantastic. 1 to 99, that's mild. It's also a low risk. Then you start getting up to 100 to 300 or 299. Moderate plaque, moderate risk. When I look this up, it says moderate plaque and moderate risk, but it's still considered higher risk or an increased risk for cardiovascular heart attack risk. And then over 300, pretty extensive plaque, and you're going to have a high risk for a heart attack. Another test you could get is carotid intima media thickness, or let's call it CIMT. And this one is an ultrasound that measures the arterial wall thickness, and it'll detect early atherosclerosis, which is a plaque buildup in the arteries restricting blood flow. You can also get a coronary CT, angiography. That is a detailed imaging for plaque and blockages. Stress testing, that assesses heart function under physical stress. So I did have this done. When I first contracted Lyme, didn't know what it was. I just knew I started having these tachycardia events and didn't know this was like cardiac Lyme. And they couldn't figure it out. I wore the Holter monitor for 3 weeks, caught the episodes and said, "We don't know where this is coming from." I was at the ER thinking I was dying of heart attacks. They're like, "You're not having a heart attack. We just don't know what's happening. Go get a stress test." And that's where they put me on the treadmill, had me get my heart rate up as high as I could get it up there. And you're wired up there. And then they said, "This is the catcher behind you," because they just when they get your heart rate up to where they want it, you get thrown off the back of this thing. The guy catches you, throws you on the table, and they immediately do an ultrasound of your heart. That was the craziest shit I've done medical test-wise. And it showed they're like, "We don't know what's happening because your heart looks amazing, and we couldn't even get you to max out running on the treadmill." But it's a stress test is a great one to see how you're functioning under stress. Okay, so that's your advanced testing. Now, let's get into the genetics because this is a freaking epigenetic podcast. So, genetics, inflammation, insulin resistance. Why genetics matter. And they do. Please, I'm going to end up saying this again later. Please don't waste your money on the tests that are just methylation. Please don't. Get a full array. I have a podcast on how to choose. Like, all DNA tests are not created equally. Not everybody will code your ApoE, which is the Alzheimer's and cardiovascular risk, properly. It is very difficult to code. Make sure you're picking quality over money or over the bullshit here out there that, oh, these 5 SNPs on methylation are going to tell us everything about you. Please don't buy into it unless that's really all you're interested in. But if you want to understand your body and see what the propensities are, do a full DNA panel. And whether it's with me or not, I don't care. Okay, your DNA. Talked about it. It's the blueprint for how your body handles fats, cholesterol, inflammation, insulin, okay? Certain genes are going to influence how the body responds to things like saturated fat. In my panel, we look at saturated fat, we look at polyunsaturated fat or your PUFAs, monounsaturated fat, and then fats overall. How it produces and clears cholesterol, and how it handles inflammatory stress. There's that IL-6, the TNF alpha. And this explains why 2 people can eat the same identical diet and have drastically different cholesterol profiles. So people out there, that carnivore you think is working for you, great. But be careful who you push it to. Don't suggest it for every single person, especially if they have these other risks, and you probably don't know that. Okay, genes, the key genes I want to talk about. One of them is called PPAR gamma, PPARG, and there's PPARG and there's PPAR gamma 2. Regulate fat and insulin sensitivity, fat storage, insulin sensitivity. So the majority of people are going to be a PPAR gamma CC, and we call that, quote, genetic privilege, meaning they likely process most fats. Doesn't always happen that way. It's a propensity, and I will tell you that one definitely goes both ways. I don't see it expressed a whole lot. The PPAR gamma CG, it's that G. That's the risk allele, is very sensitive to fats overall, but especially saturated fat. It is a very negative response to saturated fat. And so people with this gene eating high saturated fat can see a dramatic rise in LDL, in triglycerides, and overall cardiovascular risk on a high saturated fat diet. It's not the calories. So don't give me this calories in, calories out shit either. It's about fat metabolism at the cellular level. When I see a PPAR gamma CG, that to me is a big red flag. I want to make sure everything is tested. I ask, has this been tested? How are you responding? What are your lipids like? And we need to test further. We need to go deeper there, and we need to drastically keep your saturated fat to no more than 10%. Probably 5 to 10% at max of your daily caloric intake. Next one, here's the ApoE. And this is what I just referred to around cardiovascular, and it's your big Alzheimer's risk gene. So ApoE threes, if you're a 2-3, a 3-3, the 3-3 is the most common, and that is just a normal risk. It's not an increased risk. When you have a 4 in there, specifically a 3-4, a 4-4 is the highest risk. A 3-4 is the next highest risk. And I've talked about that on here that I'm a 3-4. It's why I quit drinking. That's why I gave up my freaking bacon. I have it every once in maybe twice a year now. And I was the bacon lady. I have bacon plaques friends gave me over the years out of my kitchen. I had my nickname was Bacon Lady. I found out I had this variant. I'm like, oh, hell no. And it was absolutely showing up in my cardiovascular panel. It's linked to higher LDL, apolipoprotein B or ApoB, cardiovascular risk with that high saturated fat intake. Now, I have heard, again, experts on Alzheimer's talk about how the keto diet, they put people on a keto diet, and it's amazing. Here's my thought there. If you have to put them on something like that, what were they doing before? A lot of your, especially older people, they're eating a lot of processed shit. So when you put them onto a diet that takes away the processed stuff and puts them on meat and butter and these kind of things, I think you're going to see general improvement overall. Now, I don't know. Usually you're going to see with a Mediterranean style, and again, I don't like going off of diets, but anti-inflammatory. And again, anti-inflammatory for one person is going to be different for another, but it's never going to be one with processed foods. So more ApoEs do better on that Mediterranean style. So high olive oil, right? EVOO. Fish is a great component. Some do well with some grains. I was able to bring back oat bran. It's not a grain, it's actually a grass, but 100% wild rice. I tolerate it great. Things that I was too afraid of because I was following a paleo diet, right? Get away from the diet and let's hone into you. Personally, what do you need? What is precision for you? Because it ain't what everybody else is doing. Then you have the ApoB. That's the apolipoprotein B. And this is lipoprotein production. And this gene, it directly affects the LDL particle number. So a variant in the ApoB, and I'll see this like an ApoB-AG, it's increased risk in those particle number counts, even if the LDL cholesterol looks normal. So again, and I mentioned it when we were talking about testing for it, we want to keep inflammation low and we want to keep saturated fats, especially on the low end. So this isn't going to be, you really need to monitor this in your labs. If you're still have risk factors here and have high ApoB, I would be really cautious about doing a carnivore or a keto type of diet. LPA, the genetic wild card. This one is highly inflammatory again, prothrombotic, meaning pro-clot promoting. Elevated levels increase the cardiovascular risk, independent of other cholesterol levels. It's genetic. There's not a whole lot we say that we can't work with genetically. Again, diet and lifestyle, limited effect. When I hear limited, I'm going, it's like Dumb and Dumber, where she says, your chance with me is like 1 in a million. He goes, there's still a chance. I will never give up hope that diet/lifestyle cannot affect this genetic SNP. So the more you dial in, what's your other option? To keep eating crap and keep being sedentary and drinking and doing all these things that we know are going to affect it? Choices matter. And I don't fault anybody for their choice, but I just want you to understand your risk. And then we have the IL-6 and TNF or TNF alpha genes. TNF stands for tumor necrotic factor. Again, both high inflammation SNPs, and they influence your baseline inflammation. So what the variants in these genes will do is worsen chronic inflammation, amplify damage from small dents, the little guys, the little particles, or high LPA. So again, to understand how all this goes together, if you're saying lifestyle doesn't really affect LPA, but lifestyle sure as hell is going to affect your IL-6 and your TNF alpha, which can affect the LPA, why wouldn't you dial that in? Chronic inflammation, again, we talked about that, can impair the HDL function. So we'll see, like I'll see it on my test in the little coaches area where high IL-6 or IL-6 variant or TNF variant can mean lower HDL numbers. We don't want lower. That's where we want higher. This is one you never hear about around this, but this is such a high impact gene. And I think it needs to be talked about more. And this one is called PEMT. And then along with that, there's other metabolic genes too, but PEMT is a big one. And PEMT, it's a big influence on lipid metabolism, liver function. If you've got shit going on with your liver, I bet there's a good propensity or good possibility that PEMT, you might have a variant there, but it also affects cardiovascular health. And so when we look and see, I see someone with a T variant in there. And so I'll see like a TT or a CT. Having that T there, especially that TT, it's about 30% decreased function of that PEMT. That's big, people. And it puts you at increased risk of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And I see a lot of people with variants in the PEMT, a lot. And isn't it funny? Our increase in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is like skyrocketing. So we have higher circulating LDL particle counts, increasing the risk, even if LDL looks normal. That's what happens when you have poor PEMT function. Okay? Super important. I will tell you, if you have this issue going on and no one has talked to you about, no, you got to dial that lifestyle in because there's a reason this is happening. Lifestyle and environment, how it affects our genetic expression. That's epigenetics. So something's turning up that gene. Or if you have good PEMT function and yet it's not expressing, something is dialing it down. Choices. But a fantastic supplement around liver that has to do with this phosphatidylcholine. It's fantastic. So if you have poor PEMT function and it's expressing, you can dial up your lifestyle and then supplement those lifestyle changes with phosphatidylcholine. So this interacts with the other metabolic genes, influencing fat metabolism, insulin sensitivity, and inflammation. PEMT. So if you think about PEMT, it's like a factory packaging cholesterol into safe delivery trucks, right? If the factory is not running efficiently, it's not packaging up the cholesterol, too many of those delivery trucks pile up, and increase your plaque risk, even if your arteries look good. PEMT. Here's another one around that insulin regulation and fat sensitivity. And again, I'm bringing these up because of the misnomer through the keto and carnivore world that going no carb or extreme low carb fixes insulin resistance, and you cannot become insulin resistant or have high blood sugar with a keto or carnivore diet. TCF7L2. This is another one that I love, love, love to tell people about. The variants in a TCF7L2 are linked to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. And guess what? Those risks are increased with saturated fat. So this right here is saying increased risk of insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes with high saturated fat intake. But mic drop. I would drop my mic here. So high fat diets with these genetic variants is expressing can spike insulin, glucose, and your triglycerides even faster. Then we have MTHFR. Methylation, homocysteine management. This affects folate metabolism and your homocysteine levels. When you have variants in MTHFR, you want to make sure, again, test, don't guess, test your homocysteine, test your RBC folate, test your MMA for your B12, and take a look at where you are and make sure that you're getting the right support for those variants and what is expressing, because not everybody tolerates a methylated vitamin. That's what you're going to hear right off is, "Oh, you need to go get on a methylated B." For someone with the next gene we're going to talk about, which is COMT and not COMPT. People say COMPT. It's not. It's COMT. This is all around stress and hormone regulation. And this is going to be things like dopamine, norepinephrine, estrogen. So this gene, it breaks these down. And if you have someone who is an AA or a very slow breakdown, like yours truly here, tend to have these higher levels of these neurotransmitters. That can absolutely create issues. These variants influence cortisol, stress, estrogen metabolism, inflammation, lipid profiles, cardiovascular risk. So stress management, circadian alignment are crucial with variants around COMT. Now, if you are COMTGG, maybe it's two normals. That's actually 30%. Oh, that's MTHFR. Sorry. I was not MTHFR. I was thinking of MTHFR. If you have two variants in the 1298C, everybody's more concerned with the 677T, but the 1298C, two there, which would be a TT, that one's 30% less dopamine production. And so I have a client like this, and she's a COMTAA. She's looking for that dopamine hit a lot. And that can lead to poor food choices, right? So you really want to have a plan around this. This is why this matters. So DNA explains why some thrive on high-fat diets while others develop extreme cholesterol elevations that are not healthy. If you have an extreme cholesterol elevation and every one of those tests looks good, then that's fantastic. I'm talking about for the people it doesn't. And I see the majority of them because they have tried this and they're worse. Maybe somebody like this, put this podcast out there. Inflammation amplifies the risk. These are our takeaways. Inflammation amplifies the risk. So chronic low-grade inflammation worsens the effects of high LDL particles. The small, dense, the little guy LDL particles, not just the high numbers, and high LPA. Insulin resistance, hidden driver, which is why people tend to go keto or carnivore to start with, thinking it's going to fix that. But even normal cholesterol numbers can mask metabolic issues. So look at everything. Testing matters. Genetics, advanced lipid markers, LDL particles, right? So your lipoprotein fractionation, ApoB or apolipoprotein B, ApoA1, get that ratio, LPA, and then your inflammations. Inflammation, IL-6 is another great one that you can start testing. These all look at your personalized risk profile, not just a number on a standard freaking panel for a doc to get you in or out or give you some generic recommendation. You deserve more than that. Understand your body. Get advanced testing. Consider the genetic testing. Make sure that the genetic tests you're looking for have PPAR gamma or PPARG, ApoE, ApoB, TCF7L2, LPA, PEMT, MTHFR, COMT to start, IL-6, TNF alpha. Again, all of these things super important. Focus on your anti-inflammatory strategies. Again, stress management, stress recovery, quality sleep at the right times, the right amounts, the type of foods at the right times that are right for you. If you are struggling with that, reach out. Get help from me, somebody. But I'm all about precision, personalized health. And what I'm doing with my medical AI and my knowledge, because I don't follow just the AI, the types of results I'm getting and quickly are beyond phenomenal. You just have to do things the right way. You want to track progress over time. So cholesterol is a story. It's not a snapshot of right now. things don't just happen overnight, but we can lower things. We can start to make differences pretty quickly when you get dialed in, not the guesswork. So you want to track your particle counts. Make sure that you look at former labs as well as your current labs. Look at what's your trajectory. Is it upward, downward, and make sure that it's ideal. If not, then you need to do a new plan. Inflammation, track your glucose. Do a month. I can put this in the show notes. So Liz, let's put this in the show notes. I recommend a CGM or a continuous glucose monitor called Stelo, Stelo. It's a Dexcom CGM, which is top quality. It's $99 for a month. No prescription needed. You go on, they send you 2 of them because they're good for about 2 weeks. And you download the app and it will keep track in real time of your glucose. And it is a freaking eye-opener. I saw when I wore one, the only time I spiked, one time with a Fuji apple and almond butter and 2 times with stress. And I found where I was waking up in the middle of the night having like major cortisol issues due to big blood sugar drops from doing berberine at night. And I've since dialed that in and I don't have those kind of wake ups unless I'm, again, super stressed. So track that progress over time, but pick up a Stelo if you're interested. Getting the more you understand about your body, the better. Personalized diet. Don't blindly follow a diet. Genetics and metabolic status, they absolutely matter. So to wrap up here, cholesterol isn't inherently good or bad, okay? It has its good points, it has its bad points. It's about the context with your specific body. So by combining advanced testing, genetic insights, and lifestyle optimization, need I say it again, you can take control of your cardiovascular health. People don't need to be dying of heart attacks at young ages or strokes. Know what's happening with your body. Your body is unique. Your approach should be as well. And if a doctor is saying you don't need all this, but yet you have a family history, something doesn't feel right, you're having symptoms, then you need to find another doctor. I actually had a client last year, and I'd worked with him a year prior, and I'm going to do a podcast on this, something called cytosterolemia, and it's around lipids. It's a type of cholesterol. It's plant sterol buildup. And he was very high risk genetically. It's a very genetic thing. And it was expressing in his labs. We had him do a very specific lab test, and it came up very high risk. And it took him 3 cardiologists to get someone to listen. 3. And then when he found someone that did, I said, this is the medication you need. Talk to the doctor about it. Is really stringent on his lifestyle, all of that. Lowered his cholesterol almost in half because it was very dangerous where he was. And then another person would look at that and go, your cholesterol's fine. It's that deeper dive. And my genetic test is the only one that tests for that. If you look at all of this and you're like, we still don't see a cause for this, it could be that. And I'll do a podcast on that at another time. But always keep digging deeper. And this is what I learned in my cop world is that things are never as they appear on the surface. Always go that extra step or 2. You're worth it. Your body is worth it. Please, please, please share this podcast. Let's get some information out there. If you have any questions, interact with me. Everyday Epigenetics, Raw, Real, Relatable chat page on Facebook. You can feel free to email me, Susan at healthyawakening.co, or comment on a post. And I appreciate you listening. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of you. Please rate the podcast, leave a comment, and share. That's how I can grow it and get more guests on here so you see less of me by myself and I don't get old. But get out there, make it a great day, be your most authentic self. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.